which is a foreign language to most of you. But the Holy Spirit is a great interpreter, and so we are going to communicate. And I hope you'll learn everything God wants you to learn from me. I'm one teacher of many that you're going to have, and there's some great guys here. If you don't learn, it's your fault. And you paid to come here, so you might as well learn it. I've been blessed to teach in a big variety of schools. First one was one I actually founded in Peru, and that was before Mr. Rick Bunshu was 18 years old. And so that's quite a long time ago. And I'm an old guy, and one of the problems with that is the memory's not what it used to be. It used to be that I went to one Cape Mary Bible School in Germany with 90 students, and I would sit down for an hour with everybody's photograph and the names underneath before the students actually arrived at the school. And in an hour, I would have all the names memorized according to the photographs and could greet them all by name when they arrived the next day. And some of them found that a bit threatening and intimidating, but I can't do that now. In fact, I probably won't remember yours until you've told me at least 3 times, so tell me, otherwise I won't know it. And I want to get to know you. And if there's any way that I can help at all, just please let me know. And we live in Ireland, as you've heard, and the Irish keep open house, so it seems that a lot of Americans want to visit Ireland, and so we have open house. If you want to come, you're welcome. We might be there, we might not be there, but you're welcome anyway. Okay, when I was 7, I became an atheist. I was taken to church every Sunday by my parents, and I did not have a choice in the matter. It was some people thought an interesting building because it was 12th century. I thought it was just boring and uncomfortable. All my buddies were playing soccer, and I was dragged along to church every Sunday, loathed it. And as far as I know, nobody in the place actually had a personal relationship with God. And I wondered why they do this. And when I was 7, I said to my dad, "Dad, there isn't a God really, is there? It's like Santa Claus. It's a nice idea, but no reality." And he said, "Oh, no, son, no, God's quite different. He's real." And I said, "Oh, how do you know?" He said, "Everybody knows." "No, they don't, because I don't know." "If I don't know, how do you know?" And he didn't have an answer, so at age 7, I became an atheist. Still had to go to church, but I was an atheist. And I stayed that way till I was 17, by which time I'd been given a scholarship that was going to give me a complete free ride through university to study chemistry. And once I became a Christian, all the old arguments and ways of thinking I'd had to be answered. And some people find that helpful. So I'm going to start with the book of Hosea, because Hosea is the kind of book, it really begins to live when you compare it to other bits of Scripture. It's not quite in the middle, but it's nearly in the middle. But there's a story before it, and there's a story after it. And what I will hope to do with you is show you how interconnected the Bible is. It's one amazing book. And it will come alive, and it will speak to you in a way which you possibly don't anticipate right now. So, one of the arguments that I've been known to use, and probably the strongest argument for the truth of the gospel, is the Old Testament. It's not a Christian book, it's a Jewish book. It's the only book in the world which is regarded as sacred by 3 world religions, Islam, Christianity and Judaism. And it was all finished 400 years before Jesus, started 1,300 years before Jesus, but it's a book about Jesus. And it contains some amazing elements. One of them is advanced health information. God said to his people, "Obey my laws and you will not suffer from any of the diseases that you knew in Egypt." And there's a whole bunch of laws that most people find extremely boring, don't read. You can glance over this, pass over that bit. Leviticus, forget it. But actually, it's a very fascinating book if you have the tools to get into it. And then there you find the rules for the treatment of leprosy and lepers. And the word leprosy in the Bible covers a wide range of skin diseases, not just leprosy as we know it now. And what they had to do was to isolate themselves. If you have contact with anybody with one of these diseases, stay apart from everybody and everything. And that's one way in which you stop diseases spreading. And in these wonderful days of COVID, we've learned a bit more about that, haven't we, recently? But the main rule was if you have any contact with a dead body, you wash yourself under running water, stay apart from everybody until after sundown. You don't talk to anybody, you can't go to worship, you stay isolated. Why is that surprising? Well, most of the main diseases have happened, like the Great Plagues, have happened because people didn't do that. They didn't know to do that. The first place in the world to introduce a law about getting washed was actually the state of California in 1927.
What was the law?
Well, I'll tell you in a bit.
What did you say about it?
Well, it's about running water. Not about water, actually. There was an interesting guy called Semmelweis. He was a doctor in a gynecology ward in Austria, in Vienna. And he was concerned, he was a young doctor, concerned that the death rate of his patients was 60%. 60% of the women that came to have their babies in that hospital died. And he began to keep very careful records. And he found that there appeared to be a pattern. If one patient had a fever, other patients in the ward would get the same fever, not necessarily from the same place, not necessarily closest in the room. And then he realized there was a pattern, and it was the visiting doctors and their students, as they brought them around the ward to demonstrate different, 60% death rate. And as an experiment, he said, every medical person coming into my ward must wash their hands before they enter the ward and visit anybody. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? Result, death rate dropped from 60% to 20%. Is that significant? Yeah. He thought it was. He was just a young doctor. But he was still concerned at the spread, and as I said, it seemed to be if one patient had a fever, other patients would get it. So now he introduced a second rule, and that was, if you touch a patient that has a fever, wash your hands before you touch anybody else. What do you think the result of that was?
10%?
No, he got fired. He got sacked from the hospital, could not get another job anywhere in the country. Died in a mental institution because he was so concerned for all these patients that were coming trusting doctors to help them out, and they were just spreading disease and death. When did he die? 1967. That's in my lifetime. You know, that's 3,000 years after Moses wrote the law. But if, of course, you go to wash your hands and you have a wash basin, you put a plug in, you fill it with water, temperature you like, get some soap, wash your hands, put the soap down, pull the plug out, leave. You leave infection in the bowl, don't you? So we don't do that now, do we? They developed a major refinement. They had long levers on the taps, and the doctor would come in, turn on the taps, leave the water running, wash his hands on the running water, turn them off again. Bye. So the first place to say a doctor must wash his hands before examining any patient was the state of California, and the year is 1927. The first place in the world to say a doctor must wash his hands under running water was Great Britain, and it was 1968. Finally, in 1968, Great Britain caught up with Moses from 1300 BC, wash under running water. And God didn't tell them why they had to do it. He just said, do it, and you won't have these diseases. Now, I want you to turn, if you would please, to Ezekiel chapter 26, because there's another fantastic thing about the Old Testament. And I'm going to read it, though you might think it's kind of ho-hum after a bit. Ezekiel 26, yeah. Tyre was the capital city of what used to be the land of the Philistines. And they were excited when Jerusalem was devastated because it meant that they would get all the trade that used to go through Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem was God's city. So verse 7, for this is what the sovereign Lord says. From the north I'm going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses and chariots, horsemen, and a great army. He will ravage your settlements on the mainland with the sword. He will set up siege works against you, direct the blows of his battering rams against your walls, and demolish your towers with his weapons. His horses will be so many that they will cover you with dust. Your walls will tremble at the noise of the war horses, wagons, and chariots when he enters your gates, as men enter a city whose walls have been broken through. The hooves of his horses will trample all your streets. He will kill your people with the sword, and your strong pillars will fall to the ground. They will plunder your wealth and loot your merchandise. They will break down your walls and demolish your fine houses and throw your stones, timber, and rubble into the sea. I will put an end to your noisy songs, and the music of your harps will be heard no more. I will make you a bare rock, and you will become a place to spread fish nets. You will never be rebuilt, for I, the Lord, have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. It's a very detailed prediction, isn't it? When was it made? Well, he tells us at the beginning of the chapter, 535 BC. It was an unlikely prophecy for a few reasons, one of them being the location of the city of Tyre. Well, we won't use that one. The coast, and these are all cliffs.
All what?
Cliffs. A few hundred feet, nowhere to land a boat, no way to approach that way. All they had to do was build a wall across there. If they could defend one wall, the whole area was safe. The city was here. All this was farmland. So if they were attacked, all their troops went to the wall, defended the wall, plenty of food, enough water to supply a city like San Diego now. Springs of water, so there's water, there's food, there's secure, just one wall to defend. And over the years they kept building it higher and reinforcing it. So it was impregnable, and the city had not been captured for more than 200 years. But now God says it's going to fall. And he said, I'm going to bring Nebuchadnezzar from the north, which is a little bit unlikely because you might as well know this. The nation of Israel was between three empires: the egg, the ass, and the baby. The egg is Egypt. Not bad. The ass is wonderful. The baby is okay. Those were three world empires that came to power, and they were kind of Israel's here. They were in the middle of the conflict. And Assyria at the time had just come to power and had devastated Jerusalem, which is why they were unhappy. And now Babylon is the number one power. And if Babylon was going to come to Egypt, to Israel, they'd come from the south, the southeast. But they came, as predicted, from the north. That was the first bit of the prophecy fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar had siege equipment like nobody else had, and he had weapons designed that could hurl massive rocks at great speed, and they would break down the wall of the city for the first time. After 200 years of security, they felt fine, but now the wall was broken. Nebuchadnezzar came in, plundered the city. And the next bit of the prophecy says, I will bring many nations against you like waves of the sea, one after the other, one after the other. Now the war was gone, they didn't have defense. And there are all kinds of bandit tribes moving up and down here, just little tribes, and they were able to ride in and raid the place and take what they fancied. And that continued for 230 years. One nation after another every few months would come in, and they never let them rebuild the walls. But the inhabitants of the city were very clever. there was an island off the coast. I'll do it again over here. And it had high cliffs all the way around, except it had a very natural harbor in here. But to get there, they had to sail in underneath high cliffs, which they could get on top of those with a few big rocks and a few flaming torches and drop them on any boat trying to get in there. If it was an enemy, easy to defend. And so now, every time a tribe came to raid, they would blow the trumpets. The wealthy people would grab their wealth, scramble down the cliffs where they had little boats just up above the water, get in those, sail across to the island, and then they would look back at the raiders on the mainland and go, na 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 na, and they would feel totally secure. So that continues, as I said, 235 years, till we come to a gentleman known as Alexander the Great. He was Greek, and he was in also the business of world conquest. And he came, like so many before him, captured the city. Legend has it, not necessarily true, he sat on a white horse on the cliff tops and watched them sailing over to the island. And when they thumbed their noses at him, it was not a smart thing to do, because he was a very bad-tempered individual and very determined. And he had something none of the previous enemies had, and that was a navy. So he ordered the navy to capture the island. Navy sailed against the island. They got this far, were repulsed. Alexander didn't give up easily, so he sent them again. In fact, he sent them 5 times, and 5 times they failed to capture the island. Was that the end? No, Alexander is determined. So he says, go back to the main city, dismantle it. Every sizable stone you can find, bring it down to the water. And all the stones from the city walls and the major building, all the stones were brought. And they were put in 2 lines across the island. Then he said, go back to the city, take all the major timbers from the roofs and everything, and you put those in a lattice inside the stone. Then you take your shields, and onto the shields you pile all the dust and all the rubble, and you bring it down and you fill in the little gaps between the wood until you have a solid causeway. It's half a mile long.
It must have not been too deep.
It's not deep, no. You can go and see. And having done that, the army marched across there and captured the rest of the city. What did the prophecy say? I will break down your walls, dismantle your buildings. I will put you stones, timber, and rubble in the midst of the sea. And that's what happened in that order, 250 years after the prophecy. If you were to go there now, you would see these columns of stone are still there. The timber and dust washed out a long time ago, but the stones are still there. And if you went there as it's getting dusk, you would see local fishermen hanging up their nets on those stones. I will make you a place to spread fishing nets. You can go there and see it.
Has that been rebuilt?
No. No. There's a village on the island, nothing here, And it's a perfect place for a city, but it's never been rebuilt. So it's an amazing book for prophecy, fulfilled in incredible detail. A lecturer in statistics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology asked his students to calculate the odds of somebody being able to predict that and get it right with the information available to them at the time. And this was not a Christian school, of course, a secular school. And the lowest figure that anybody came up with was 1 in 369,000 chances of him predicting that and getting it right. The Old Testament is an amazing book for its advanced health rules, its fulfilled prophecies, but it's a book about Jesus. Of course, it's also a Jewish book, and there are two main features to it. One is the Passover. When there were slaves in Egypt, every family had to take a lamb. What kind of a lamb? A male lamb. What kind of a lamb? A young male lamb. What kind of a lamb? A young male lamb without any defect. And kill it. And apply the blood on the lintel above their door and the doorposts on either side. 3 splashes of blood. And God says, when I see that, I will pass over that house. Won't visit it. Otherwise, I will visit, and the oldest boy and the oldest male animal of every family will die. And of course, that's what happened just after Israel came out of Egypt. They repeated that every year for 1,300 years till Jesus came. And they did so on what they call the Day of Atonement. But there was another thing they did on the Day of Atonement, and that was they had a goat, just one goat, unlike the lamb where it was every family, one goat. And the goat was brought to the high priest, and the high priest confessed the sins of the whole nation for the previous year. I don't think he mentioned everybody's name or itemized every sin, but symbolically he's representing the nation. He has the names of all the tribes on precious stones on his chest and his shoulders. And so, representing the nation, he confesses their sins over the goat, and symbolically they're transferred from the people through their representative to the goat, which is then taken into the desert and turned loose, carrying the sins and the accusation and the guilt away from the people. Except it wasn't called the desert, it was called a land cut off, which is the phrase Isaiah picks up on in Isaiah 53 when he talks about he was wounded for our transgressions. Who will declare his generation, for he was cut off from the land of the living. So the lamb was their protection. The blood of the lamb was their protection. The goat removed the sin and the guilt. When Jesus first appeared in public, John the Baptist pointed to him and he said, "Behold," what did he say? "Behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world." See, the lamb did not take away the sin. That was the goat. The lamb was their protection. The goat took away their sin. Jesus is both. And for 1,300 years, every year, they practiced this, not knowing that they were just pointing forward to the fulfillment who is Jesus himself. The other main factor of the Old Testament is the land of Canaan, in which God tells them, Deuteronomy chapter 8, It's got everything. It's got gold, silver, precious stones, iron, copper, wheat, barley, vines, fig trees, springs of water. It's got everything you need for food, for clothing, for weapons, for tools, for trading. You will not lack anything in it. That's his promise. A complete package deal called Canaan. As slaves, they owned nothing. They had to have somewhere to live. And it was already there for them. They didn't have to build it. They didn't have to set up farms or build roads or homes. It was all built, waiting for them, and God gave it to them. That corresponds, of course, to Jesus. Letter to the Colossians. In him dwells all the fullness of God bodily. And you are complete in him, nothing missing. He doesn't just shelter you from the consequences of sin, take away the guilt of your sin, but equips you for everything that you're ever going to need in the person of Christ. Or in 2 Peter, he has given us everything that has to do with life and godliness in Christ. So the Old Testament is an amazing book, but its theme is Jesus. Where does Hosea come? Well, his dates are about 750 to 720 BC. Assyria is just coming to power, just getting stronger than Egypt. And they're a threat. The nation of Israel is God's chosen nation, and they're a miraculous nation in many ways. Miraculous, first of all, in their beginnings. Abraham was 75 years old. His wife Sarah was 65. They'd been married a long time. Not one pregnancy. And we're given the reason. She was barren. Couldn't bear children. God promised them a son. It was kind of ridiculous, and they laughed about it. But God promised them a son. When Abraham was 99, in other words, 24 years later, God remembered his promise. That's what it says. What does that mean? God remembered his promise? What does it mean? God woke up one morning and said, no, if you're not sure about the way the Bible uses the word, check out the first time the Bible uses it. The first time the Bible uses the word remember is with Noah. He was in a kind of unusual boat. You know how long he was in there? A long time, yeah, just over a year. It's a long time to be in a boat. And what happened after they'd been there a year? Here's what it says. God remembered Noah. It was about time, wasn't it? Was it? Noah! No. God didn't call him back to mind because he'd forgotten him. When the Bible says God remembers, it means he takes action. It means in God's specific timetable, the moment had come for his next intervention. So when God remembered Noah, he brought him out of the boat. When God remembered his promise to Abraham, he's 99, Sarah is 89, and she conceives for the first time. Pretty unlikely, isn't it? A baby that should never have been born, and the entire Israeli nation descends from that one miracle kid. They shouldn't exist, but they do. They're a nation miraculous in their beginning. They're also a nation miraculous in their escape from Egypt, numbering roughly 3 million. They're slaves to the wealthiest, most powerful nation in the world, and the whole nation escapes without any loss of life because God rescues them. So they're a unique people, both by their creation, beginning, and their rescue from Egypt. They're also the only nation with which God made a marriage covenant, sacred agreement. And he says, I will be your God and you will be my people. That's the deal. You're my bride. And this was set up on Mount Sinai, and they were given laws. And the laws we mentioned, the health laws, but there were other ones. And laws are always important because they provide some kind of structure and agreement for life to be possible. If you've got 3 million people and no rules, then you've got a situation like traffic in Dublin. It's chaotic. But he gave those to them, and they are his chosen people. But then they split. First of all, they wanted a king when God was their ruler. They wanted a king because all the other nations had kings. They wanted to be like everybody else. But they'd been chosen to be a unique people, different from everybody else. So the rest of the world, if they wanted to know what God was like, had only to look at Israel and see their individual behavior and their national behavior, and they would see the character of God in the nation of Israel. They weren't supposed to be like everybody else. They were supposed to be world leaders. But we've all experienced what it's like to want to imitate the rest of the world and absorb our thinking from them instead of giving the truth we know to them. So they have a king, we want a king. So first they get the kind of king they want, who's King Saul, 7 feet tall, good looking and all the rest of it. All the girls liked him, so he was popular. But he was a disaster as a king, so he's replaced by one after God's heart, that's David, and he becomes the ideal king in some ways, which is fine until we come to his son Solomon, who rules after David. And Solomon had a pretty extravagant lifestyle. He lived in a fantastic palace, and he had 1,000 wives. 300 official wives and 700 slave wives. And anybody who's tried to support a wife knows that it can be an expensive business. Trying to support 1,000 wives is a very expensive business, because if you think about it, if he spends time with 3, it's time alone, with 3 of his wives every day, it means they all get 1 day a year, right? Which isn't very satisfying if you're a wife. So what do? Well, you try to make yourself look more attractive, more glamorous than all the other wives, so you spend a bit more on yourself. And it becomes more and more ridiculously expensive. So what happens? Solomon has to get money, How does he get it? He taxes the people. Do people like being taxed? Do Americans like being taxed? You fought a war of independence over a 2% tax. I think most of you would settle for 2% now. So there's an uprising against Solomon because of all of his extravagance. It continues throughout his lifetime, but when he dies, his son Rehoboam should take the throne. But there's a revolt against him. He has another brother, Jeroboam, and there are 13 tribes. 10 split off with Jeroboam, and they form the nation of Israel. 2 who possess land stay loyal to Rehoboam and the capital city, Jerusalem. And did I say there were 13 tribes? Well, there were. The other one were the priests, the tribe of Levi, and they were all in Jerusalem. So there are 3 tribes in Jerusalem and 10 rebel tribes, and they set up another capital, Samaria. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem was all the priests were in Jerusalem. And 3 times a year, every Jewish man was supposed to go and worship in Jerusalem. And King Jeroboam was afraid that if his people kept on going to Jerusalem, it would weaken their allegiance to him and the new capital of Samaria, and they might revolt against him. So he doesn't want them to go to Jerusalem. He doesn't want them to go to the temple, and doesn't want them to go to the priest that God had ordained. So what do? Well, we just set up another religion in Samaria. 2 bull calves, golden. These are the gods that brought you out of Egypt. And they believed it. Is this intelligent? Huh? They didn't even exist when they came out of Egypt. They can't see anything, they can't hear anything, they can't do anything. So why does a nation embrace a hunk of metal instead of the living God? Well, see, number one, they're gold. Gold looks expensive, doesn't it? We want a God who will make us rich, isn't that right? The bull calf is the strongest thing they knew, because Caterpillar were having a very low financial year that year. So you couldn't buy a diesel tractor, but the bull calf, that was the strongest thing they knew. And they wanted a God who was strong because he could defend them, right? Make them wealthy, defend them, isn't that great? Anything else? Well, yeah. You see, you can pick up, if there are enough of you, you can pick up the calf and make it point any direction you like, which is exactly what they wanted in a God. A God who would defend them, make them rich, but whom they could manipulate. And yeah. Not only a God like that, politicians like that. Let's have that. So, what is the main difficulty with this? And to do that, I need to ask you, what do you think is the most serious sin?
Worshipping something other than God.
Good. It's more serious than murder, more serious than adultery or theft. Why? Well, we quite often say God loves you, don't we? You heard that? What does that mean?
What did you say?
God loves you. What does that mean?
Jealous.
If you take your definition from love out of a pop song, doesn't mean a whole lot. When we say God loves you, what kind of love do we mean? Red hot? White hot? Yes. Our God is a consuming fire. White hot love looks for white hot love in return. So when God issues the commandments, the first one is, you will have no other God before me. Why is that first? Because it's most important. From God's perspective, this is what you've got to get a hold of. God isn't just a nice, vague, let everything happen as a... No, he's a white-hot, loving God. And the worst sin you can commit is to break the first commandment, is to have another God. And here this nation is worshipping two hunks of metal and then copying the religions of the nations around them, which was basically the worship of two gods, Baal and Ashtaroth. The word Baal simply means Lord, and in the thinking of the Canaanite tribes, every little parcel of ground had its own spirit god, its own Baal. And if you were a farmer and you had a farm, you wanted your land to be productive, you had to keep Baal happy. How did you do that? By making sacrifices to him, and by going to the local Baal shrine where you could find a female prostitute and have sex with her, and Baal was happy to see you doing that, and he would bless your farm and make it more productive. It didn't please God very much, and it wasn't great for family life, but that's what they did. Who was Ashtaroth? Well, Ashtaroth was the female equivalent of Baal. She was kind of Baal's girlfriend, so the farmers' wives then had to go to the shrines of Ashtaroth where they would find male prostitutes and have sex with them, and then the farm would really be blessed. And that was their thinking. So they've forsaken the true God, and instead of that, they've got two golden calves, and they're worshipping Baal and Ashtaroth, and God is withdrawing his affection. Hosea was born in Israel, not in Judah where you've got Jerusalem and the priests, but in Israel where you've got the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth and everything else that goes along with that. And Hosea's dad was called Be'eri, which has nothing to do with an alcoholic product. Be'eri means preacher. Hosea's dad was a preacher, and he was loyal to God, and he was probably head of the only household in the whole country that was loyal to God. And when he and his wife had a child, they decided to call him Hosea, which means God saves. So Hosea from birth is a walking message. God saves. It's as though the Prime Minister of the United States, who is a little past his prime, shall we say nicely, if he and his wife were to have a son now in their old age. So your president gets a new son, and he's interviewed on television. The eyes of the nation are upon him. What are you going to call him? And he says, we're going to call him Jesus Saves. It would make a little bit of an impact, and it wouldn't necessarily be popular throughout the whole country. Bless you. Just wipe it up so it doesn't harden. So, Barry is a godly man, the only one in his nation. The nation is seriously corrupt, and he has a son, and he calls him Hosea. God saves. And what we're going to look at is, how does this kid grow up in this totally rotten society? No support from anybody except Dad. How do you survive in that kind of a culture? And what happens to him? It's an interesting story. And that looks like 9:45, which I believe is coffee time or something like that. So thank you. See you later.
Thank you.